While the world watches the battle of generations with bated breath, something strange is happening. Social media is clogged with millennials whining about student debt and Zoomer memes about how they'll never buy a house. On the other side are the baby boomers, accused of hoarding all the planet's resources. But in this noisy crowd, there is a group that the financial media has simply chosen to ignore. Generation X. People born between 1965 and 1980. No one is making hyped-up TV series about them. They aren't running crypto channels, and they aren't building personal brands on every corner. But right now, they are the true kings of cash. Federal Reserve numbers don't lie. The average net worth of a Gen X household today is $243,000. That is nearly 4 times more than millennials, and nearly 8 times more than Generation Z. While everyone else was looking for a magic pill in podcasts and fintech apps, these people silently cornered the market. And they didn't do it thanks to the system, but in spite of it. Their superpower is total skepticism. They don't believe in free lunches. They don't trust consultants. And they are used to verifying everything themselves. They grew up in an era when you couldn't just Google information. Wanted to invest? Go to the library, grab books, and gnaw into annual company reports. They studied Warren Buffett's letters before he became a living meme. And they understood the essence of compound interest long before it became a trendy quote on social media. This is a generation that learned from its bloody mistakes in real time. The dot-com crash of 2001 didn't kick them out of the market. It taught them to distinguish real profit from hype and empty promises. And while the whole world chased fast money, they built a foundation that is impossible to destroy. What many call Generation X's luck is actually an ironclad psychological immunity. Unlike those accustomed to endless growth and cheap money, Xers are always waiting for a gut punch. And when that punch landed in 2008, while the whole world was in agony, this generation showed the lowest rates of panic selling. While investors were dumping assets at the very bottom, Gen X just kept methodically buying. Why? Because they weren't just following advice. They understood exactly what they owned. Their financial confidence is built on a foundation of boring, almost tedious knowledge. They spent years studying tax codes, insurance terms, and the nuances of mortgage lending. They didn't delegate their understanding of money to consultants who earn off commissions. According to Vanguard, only 38% of Xers seek professional help. That's a quarter less than millennials. This is a generation of loners who trust only the numbers they've crunched themselves. This independence gives them an incredible advantage. They don't react to market noise. When the S&P 500 drops 50%, Gen X doesn't call their broker in tears. They know this is just a seasonal asset sale. They understand the difference between a company that actually makes money and a dud living on hype and investment rounds. For them, a crisis isn't the end of the world, but the only time you can buy the future at a discount. But the real secret to their dominance is diversification, raised to an absolute. While other generations are just now discovering side hustles and personal branding, Gen X has been building a system of backup airfields for decades. They embedded the principle of strategic redundancy into everything: their careers, income, and skills. Census data shows that 34% of workers in this generation have more than one source of income. For the typical Gen X representative, a job is just the tip of the iceberg. While the main salary pays the bills and fills the retirement account, they always have something else. It might be side consulting, a small share in a spouse's business, or a rental property. This isn't an attempt to drop everything and go freelance. It is the creation of a system that cannot be broken by a single firing or a single crisis. This is exactly what allowed them to dominate after 2010. When the housing market lay in ruins, Xers had free cash and multiple income sources to take a risk and buy up cheapened assets. They increased stock contributions when shares cost pennies and refinanced loans at historically low rates. They acted like cold-blooded corporations, while everyone else was paralyzed by fear. As a result, their sense of financial security today is higher than any other generation, even if they formally have less money in their accounts than baby boomers. Because for them, security isn't a sum total, but the number of ways to earn money if the world goes to hell again tomorrow. The most interesting thing about Generation X is that you will never know about their wealth by their appearance. Marketers are going crazy because these people have money, but they flat out refuse to show it off. This is stealth wealth in its purest form, and it's not a question of modesty, but a rigid financial strategy. They are the last generation that doesn't turn their finances into a public performance. While others spend time posting about new cars and luxury hotels, Gen X just saves. This creates a colossal advantage for them. When no one knows you have money, no one expects you to spend it. They don't participate in the consumption race and don't try to impress neighbors. A classic example is a Gen Xer driving a 12-year-old Honda with 300,000 kilometers on the odometer. It's not that he can't buy a new one. It's just that he calculated that $45,000 invested in the market at 8% annually will turn into $97,000 in 10 years. He chooses nearly $100,000 in the future over the fleeting pleasure of new car smell today. Every dollar they didn't spend on showing off is a dollar working for them. They live in houses bought 20 years ago, even though they can afford mansions. They eat at local restaurants and don't look for places where the menu has no prices. This anti-flex mentality protects their capital. When your friends and relatives don't know how much is in your account, they don't ask for loans and don't expect you to always pick up the tab at the bar. Their wealth grows in silence while they simply live their lives. Generation X's attitude toward debt makes economists scratch their heads. They aren't opponents of credit, but they treat it with surgical precision. Data shows they may have huge mortgage balances, yet minimal credit card debt. Their logic is simple. Debt is permissible only if it finances an asset that grows in value or generates income. Everything else is bought with cash, or not bought at all. They caught the window of free money between 2009 and 2021, when central banks pushed rates to historic lows and mortgage financing became absurdly cheap. Gen X homeowners refinanced en masse at 3%, locking in long-duration debt at rates below inflation. Many leveraged that environment to acquire rental properties, converting cheap credit into cash-flowing assets. They understood spread, borrowing at 3% against real estate, appreciating at 4 to 6% annually is positive carry. Over time, tenants service the debt, inflation erodes the principal, and equity compounds. But simultaneously, they attacked high-interest liabilities with urgency. Auto loans, consumer financing, and especially credit card balances were paid down aggressively. The logic is straightforward capital allocation. A fixed mortgage at 3% on an appreciating asset is leverage working in your favor. Revolving debt at 18 to 24% APR on depreciating goods is negative compounding. A sofa loses value the moment it's delivered. The interest, however, compounds relentlessly. In other words, they differentiated between productive debt and destructive debt. One builds balance sheet strength and optionality. The other extracts future income for past consumption. That distinction, more than income level alone, explains why many of them emerge from the period structurally stronger, while others remain trapped in high-cost liabilities. This generation learned to adjust their debts to economic cycles. In 2011, when housing cost 40% less than at the peak, it was Gen X who were the largest group of investment property buyers. They weren't smarter than everyone else. They were simply ready to act while the rest were paralyzed by fear. They understood. The best moment to borrow is when assets are cheap and rates are low. And because they had stashes and diversified incomes, they could afford this risk while others were just counting their losses. The biggest lie of modern times is the belief that capital is created by one lucky shot. We look at charts of crypto or Nvidia stock skyrocketing and think that is what success looks like. But Generation X knows the truth, which sounds as boring as possible. Wealth is a function of time and discipline. Their main asset isn't intellect or access to insider info, but 26 years of continuously being in the market. Let's do the math. If you had invested $156,000 in the S&P 500 index in 1998 and just forgot about it for 26 years, today you would have $520,000 in your account without a single additional contribution, just by virtue of not twitching. The problem with most people is that they try to outplay the market by jumping onto departing trains. Xers just got in the car and rode it to the terminal. They survived the dot-com bubble, the 9/11 attacks, the mortgage crisis, and the pandemic. Every time the media screamed, "All is lost," they just kept making contributions. Their discipline isn't a superpower, it's a habit. They are the last generation that understands real money grows slowly. They aren't looking for X's, pun intended. They are looking for compound interest. While other generations change strategies every 6 months after reading new gurus, Gen X sticks to a plan drawn up back in the 90s. And it is this predictability that made them richer than anyone who went looking for adventure. Generation X didn't have an easier economy. They had their own recessions, their own wars, and periods of wild uncertainty. But they won because they accepted the rules of the game as they are, not as they wanted them to be. They didn't wait for help from the state, didn't hope for an inheritance, and didn't believe the world owed them anything. Their success is not an accident of timing. It is a repeatable framework. It functions as a practical roadmap for financial independence. Whether you are 25 and just entering the workforce, or 55 and restructuring your balance sheet for the next phase of life. First, learn for yourself. Do not outsource understanding. Advisors compensated by commission optimize for transaction volume, not necessarily for your net returns. Develop baseline financial literacy, cash flow analysis, asset allocation, tax efficiency, cost of capital. Your knowledge is defensive armor. Without it, every downturn feels like chaos. With it, volatility becomes opportunity. Second, create redundancy. A single income stream is concentration risk. Employment income can disappear. Industries can contract. Platforms can deplatform. Build layered optionality, additional skills, side ventures, dividend-producing assets, equity exposure, perhaps rental cash flow. The objective is structural resilience, so that failure in one domain does not trigger systemic collapse in your personal economy. Third, practice stealth wealth. True wealth is invisible. It sits in appreciating assets, low leverage, liquidity reserves. Avoid financing lifestyle inflation with debt. Spending borrowed money on depreciating goods to signal status is negative ROI behavior. Preserve capital. Let compounding work quietly. Fourth, use time. Do not wait for perfect entry points. Perfectionism is often disguised procrastination. Start allocating capital, however modestly. Consistency, reinvestment, and time in the market historically outperform attempts at precision timing. Compounding rewards duration more than brilliance. Generation X proved. To become a king of cash, you don't need to be a genius. You just need to be the most patient and cold-blooded player in the room. While the rest make noise and chase hype, Xers continue to take this world for themselves, quietly, calmly, and very effectively.